Yay.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to our live stream, Coffee, Politics, and Buses, where Stephen, David, and I will discuss various political topics that concern Cambridgeshire, our own areas to represent on the various councils that we're on, as well as make some comments around buses, but also we'll have a topic each time. So, last time, those of you who watched this last time, we discussed the structures of local authorities in Cambridgeshire. So you remember uh, taking from like parish council, town council, district, county council, combined authority, Greater Cambridge Partnership. So we discussed a bit the structures, who actually decides on the different buses, and how we can perhaps reform some of the structures of local government, so it is a bit easier for all of us to understand who is responsible for what. So that was the topic of last time on local authority structures. You can still watch the recording on a different social media if you haven't seen it. And Stephen also transformed it into a podcast as well, which he will tell you a bit more about at the end about this one as well. But today we have a new and more exciting topic than yesterday. Not yesterday. A week is a long time in politics, and whenever we did it 2 weeks ago, actually, and we will focus on this phrase around the war on the motorist, but we'll take it first to the national level. So first of all, we'll speak about the most exciting thing that happened politically in the last few days, which is the Conservative Party conference, some of the announcements that emerged from that. One of those announcements is the so-called plan for drivers. So we'll look a bit into like what this means and like have our thoughts on some of the aspects of that. But then also we'll bring this to the local level to give you an update around what happens with the Greater Cambridge Partnership, the congestion charge to fund the bus improvement proposal, the making connection proposals, what happened to their board at the board meeting on the 28th of September, and what is next for transport in Cambridge. So I see already some people joining. Hello, everyone. For those of you who are new to this, I'm Alex. I'm one of the county councillors. So I will allow my guests to introduce themselves and tell a bit more about their role in their local councils as well. So, David.
Hi, I'm David. I'm on Huntingdon Town Council, representing Huntingdon North East Ward, most of which is the Oxmoor estate.
Thank you, David. And Stephen?
So I'm a county councillor, a backbench county councillor these days. I used to be the chair of the county council, but I've retired to the backbenches. And on HDC, I'm a cabinet member as well. So I've got two hats.
Thank you, Stephen. So we will, in the next episodes of this live stream, we'll try to invite some special guests as well, perhaps people who have different political views on some of those topics. So if you have any recommendations, or if you are one such person who is watching today and really disagrees with what we're saying on this podcast, please do get in touch, because we like to have a diversity of views, whether we discuss local authority structures or transport or the plan for drivers. So let's bring this to national debate first. So Rishi Sunak, and I am on his main Twitter post on this plan for drivers a few days ago. So he posted this that got a lot of attention, and of course you have the document as well, which is the plan for drivers, but we won't go into very much detail because we're trying to keep the discussion quite light at 7:30 a.m. So Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, said, "We're a nation of drivers. Most of us use a car every day, and for many life will be difficult without their car. But too often drivers feel under attack. That changes today with a long-term plan to improve drivers' experience on the road." So here is how. This is what he and his party, the Conservative Party, are proposing on the plan for drivers. So I'll read those headlines, and then I will invite you to comment on what you think personally as a driver or non-driver, and also what you think from your political perspective as well. So the plan for drivers include ruling out blanket 20-mile-an-hour zones, no LTN, so that's no low traffic neighborhoods without local consent, clamping down on rip-off fines. I guess there should be some detail on this, what that actually means, but that's the headline, clamping down on rip-off fines. And then what they will do instead of those policies that they object to, they will free up bus lanes when not in use. So potentially, probably this means restricting some of the hours where the bus lane is bus only. Fines for overrunning street works. That is an interesting one to debate locally. a new national parking platform. And of course, there are other ideas as well, but this is what is put as headlines on Twitter and on social media. So they say, well, our long-term plan means helping smoother journeys, stopping unfair enforcement, easier parking, and cracking down on inconsiderate driving. Now, of course, this is what Rishi Sunak says, and like there's a document attached to that. But of course, this is framed within the context of the war on the motorist and opposing that, I guess, as an ideology. So it's not only the actual policies, it's also the narrative and the framing of it as well. Stephen, what do you make of all of this?
So, unlike both of you two, I am a regular car driver, mainly because I'm a county councillor and I couldn't get around. Well, you try really hard, Alex, to do it in your on the bus, but if you look at your TikTok, you'll see all the struggles of trying to support a county-wide organisation using your just the public transport. So I've got an electric car which I lease out of my councillor allowance. That's what my councillor allowance pays for, and I use that to go to meetings across the county and as far as Kings Lynn sometimes and Loughborough as well, those kind of places. So we have to move around quite a lot, and for me to hold down a full-time job and do that without a car would be really difficult. And I think that's the reality of most people's lives. And whatever you think about them environmentally, I think that there's only 22% of families or households in the UK that don't have a car, which is a relatively small number. So for most people, lots of people, like he says, spend lots of time in their car and they get enraged in small things. Other than your accommodation or your house, it's probably the most expensive thing that most people ever buy. And so there is some good sense. So I was on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire on Monday morning talking about the A428 or A421 upgrade again, and whether I was opposed to it or I supported it. And it's a difficult situation, isn't it? Because we had that whole thing blocked because of Transport Action Network, a protest group saying it's not biodiverse, it's going to increase congestion, it doesn't have enough active transport. It's going to kill biodiversity. You're going to knock down. We've had lots of complaints about Coat and Orchard, but of course, the new A421, A428 upgrade will cause lots of environmental damage, and I agree with all of those things. But the people I represent and myself use cars, and so I support that reluctantly. And it's the same with some of this stuff. Actually, it's not all completely unreasonable. Some of it's silly, but I think there's some good sense to some of it as well. And that's the problem, isn't it? It's the rhetoric, like a war on motorists, which is what people talk about. And there's some good things there, and there's some very silly things there as well.
David, what is your view on this as someone who doesn't drive around the county like Stephen?
So I find that the rhetoric, as Stephen says, again, that's politics. I think it's kind of bizarre for national government to be trying to decide what the speed limits are in, or how, let's say piddling on the marsh decides whether it's going to have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit or whatever. And one of the problems with this country is it is too centralized, and you have to allow people to make decisions even if they're unpopular. So most people do drive. I mean, I very rarely drive, but I do occasionally. And I have the use of car. My wife has a car, and she drives to work. It's for a lot of people it is not practical, particularly in a rural area like Cambridgeshire. It's not practical to get by without a car, particularly if you've got kids. The thing there is, well, then how can we make it easier? So that can be things like, I don't know, well, I'm going to say it, buses, school buses and so on. The other thing is about a war on motorists is driving fun at the moment? Are people enjoying driving? Because the time I enjoyed driving most, I think, was right at the start of COVID, when I had to go and get my laptop because it was being repaired and I needed it for work. So it was entirely permitted within the rules, but there was no one on the roads. But is driving fun at the moment? That it doesn't seem to be. and it's we go for the car by default all the time, and these are things that are painful in the short term and electorally unpopular in the short term, but once they're established, I think people generally quite like them. But if you do anything that restricts the use of the car, you seem to get hammered. I just want to reply to so James left a comment: is riding the bus fun? Well, I'm not sure it's fun, but I will take the bus in preference to the car because it means I can do stuff. I can do my emails or whatever. Read a book that I can't while I'm driving. If I've got the choice between, particularly if it's a long journey, I'll take I'd rather go by bus or by train so that I can actually sort of sit and read and write or whatever it is, rather than on a car where you're sort of stuck there.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because for me, it really depends on the journey. Like, it depends what the choice is. And, just probably everyone knows by now, but I don't have a car. But I do have, people are surprised I do have a driving license. And I'm one of those people, like actually quite a few people who are similar age as me, who got our licenses when we were 18, 19. I got mine when I was 19. And then we didn't have a car because initially for the first few years, we couldn't really afford to. I mean, to be completely honest, in the first few years of working and studying, I just couldn't justify the cost. I didn't need it every day either because I was, going to university. I was working around the university in part-time jobs and so on. But then, of course, moving to Cambridge and then being on the county council, like, you do think like, well, like now it is extremely difficult, and everyone knows that I take buses around the county. So, when you look at, well, if you live in East Cambridgeshire, to go to Alconbury to the county council, it takes about like 3 hours and 3 bus changes as compared to like 35 minutes of driving. So did it cross my mind to get a car? Yes, but again, you make the same calculation of like, do I need this every day? How much it would cost as opposed to public transport? And I am like really a nerd for savings and for making the budgets very efficient, including my own personal budgets. So then when you kind of compare the cost and like whether you need this every day or not, you make the choices. The reality is, I think, for a lot of my residents and lots of people who do want easier driving and measures for cars as well, is the fact that I do need this every day. So I think I would think very differently about this if I needed to be every single day at a certain time where I couldn't, there was no bus route, or I couldn't like spend 3 hours on the bus. And I had, of course, multi-stop journeys as well, such as getting children to nursery, to school, such as like picking up things from different places and so on. So I think a lot of those debates are very politicized and very difficult and very emotional sometimes because they're personal. Because, like I speak about my personal experience and why I don't have a car and why at some point I will probably have one because the public transport is not great in our area. In the same way, some of my residents who actually have to rely on the car and have no equivalent bus route are very they bring the personal experience in the same way as some people who don't have a car and actually don't need one because they either have they can cycle to work, for example, or they actually have a bus route to work. They will also bring that kind of perspective. So it's very difficult politically because it's like a very personal issue. It's kind of like discussing, not to the same extent, but being in the immigration sector for many years, it's kind of like discussing immigration, which is always, I think you have the pragmatic policies, but also you have the personal experience and kind of the emotional and narrative aspect of it as well. So that is my experience. What I think really not upsets me, but like I think frustrates is the right word, frustrates me about the plan for drivers and the government's narrative now, is that they put all those measures in one thing, saying, well, this is the war on motorists. So I'll give you one example, and I think this links to the local level, the 20-mile-an-hour areas. We had this debate in highways and transport. I'm not on highways and transport in the county council. And one of the items this week was around which 20-mile-an-hour area applications for the highways and transport committee to approve, because we have a limited amount of funding. So there were more applications than what could be funded in this round. And actually, it was quite surprising to see how many parishes from across the county, across the 5 different districts, and how many local residents applied and said, we actually want our school to be 20 miles an hour. I know that's something that most people agree with because it's schools. But also some people saying, some parishes, some local residents saying we want the whole village or a big part of this village to be 20 miles an hour as well. So I think that is difficult because if you put everything, the 20 mile an hour that often do have community support, the bus lanes, any kind of like road charging and everything else in the same box, then you can't really have a nuanced debate if the narrative that you're already boxed into is that if you support any of those, you're like against the private motorist. So for me, it's more about, okay, let's look at what's pragmatic and what's not, and what is actually possible to do. So I'm not sure what you think about this. You represent, especially Stephen, I know you have many parishes and you have discussed this 20 mile an hour issue. So what do you think your parishes feel about this? And what do you think about this 20 mile an hour policy being put within this war on motorists? Of course, I have to say, Rishi Sunak says we're opposing like a blanket 20 mile an hour. You can interpret that how you want.
Yeah, but that's the big issue, isn't it? Because there are no plans for blanket 20 mile an hour coverage anywhere. Yeah, even in Wales, it's they talk about it being, but it's not 20 miles an hour. And certainly in Cambridgeshire and Hunstanshire, so I've got 8 parishes. Parish meetings, which I attend most weeks of the night, it seems. And each of those has made their own decision based on their own circumstances as well, and I haven't tried to guide them in those decisions or really, I'm sat at the back listening to them. Some of them want to have 20 mile an hour zones. Some of them have had 20 mile. So Amesbury in St Neots has already got the 20 mile an hour signs going up now as well. So that's being implemented. And that's the best way of dealing with these things, isn't it? It depends on the village. It depends on the area. And there's no such thing as 20 mile an hour blanket. So it's one of those policies. It's just it's just rhetoric against a policy that never really existed. They've been in power for the last 13 years. They haven't imposed 20 mile an hour blanket zones anywhere. Don't know what Labour are going to do if they get into power or whatever. But at the moment, it's just not a thing, and it's just cancelling something that never really existed. So, and whether 20 mile an hour, for safety point of view around schools, I think it's a good idea. The other benefits are not always very well posed, in terms of the reduction in pollution and even the reduction in road traffic accidents in 20 mile hours. There's not a lot of really great scientific evidence, but that's why we have parish councils and town councils to make difficult decisions. And I support my parishes and whatever decision they choose to make.
David, what's the feeling in Huntingdon around 20 mile an hour around where you live, and wider town as well?
So we sort of basically asked a bit around what people wanted, and there were I mean, as with everything, there's mixed views. There were some, but we did have residents coming to us saying we would really like a 20 mile an hour. So on Stukely Meadows estate, people wanted 20 miles an hour, for instance. Outside a couple of the schools, people particularly wanted 20 miles an hour. So there are people who don't like it, or people who okay, get the logic, but it will slow them down. And some people who positively want it. So it's mixed. The one thing I'll say is that you tend to get there tends to be a lot of shrillness, and I don't like saying on both sides, but on both sides. That you get one side saying that you're anti-motorist, all of the rest of it, and then the other side you get why do you hate cyclists and pedestrians, and why do you want to kill us all? And it's like these are relative, these need a little bit of a sort of thought and consultation.
Yes, I mean, I do agree. I think, like, in general, the narrative on this or any of the kind of culture war related topics doesn't help to make any progress, because if you look at anything that was like any progress that has been made is usually a compromise. It's usually somewhere in the middle as a policy, because there are mixed views on all those aspects, but you don't enable that kind of compromise and discussion if you have, yes, you're promoting the war on motorists, like being accused on one side and also being accused on the other side from other things as well. I find myself always in a very like difficult position on this, because on the one hand, like I don't own a car yet. It depends where I move. Like if I was in one of the villages, like I would probably have one. I would admit to that. And it is only because I can, with great difficulty, and 6 times or 5 times more the time, I can probably get to most places I currently need to get for work and for the council.
But you also live near to the city, don't you, as well? So you live in an area. I know where you live doesn't have the best public transport, but you have better public transport than if you lived in Abbottsley or Worsley or Grandon, which have 1 bus a week. So at least there's a possibility. But for 50% of the district, Huntingdonshire, and 70% of the county who live in rural locations, buses aren't even an option sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if I was living in one of the 50 plus villages in Huntingdon, I would definitely have a car, because I wouldn't be able to go to my council meetings without. I mean, some people can say like, well, you can cycle, but that's how I'm in a difficult position of debate, because I don't cycle either. So for me, it's the bus. And probably like if I wasn't able to take the bus, if I didn't have this, which is like a difficult choice, because it does take me like more than 4 or 5 times the time on most routes. But it is a choice in the sense that I could, just, I have the flexibility, luckily, to do my emails on the bus, like pretty much if you're a resident watching this and you ever got a response from your casework, it is written on my 6 hours of commute spent per day on buses. But that's the thing, that because I can be flexible, because if I had a job that wasn't flexible and I couldn't do my actual work or my admin work on the bus, I wouldn't be able to, because I would be like, well, no way I will spend like 5 hours on the bus. Now it's like 5 hours of work, because I'm doing, I hotspot my phone, I'm putting my laptop, I'm connecting, like I'm doing my casework, like I'm doing my other work, admin as well. And it is, it's not how public transport should be used, but you do what you can, you make do with what you have.
Are we just going to gloss over the fact that you can't ride a bike as well? What's all that about? And do the Cambridge Labour Party know about this? Because otherwise you might get kicked out. Surely that's...
I don't think so. I think we accept the diversity of views. Like, it's not that I'm obviously, like I encourage everyone to cycle where they can, but I think we have to recognize that some people, for whatever reason, they cannot, and there are both visible and invisible disabilities. I can't drive a manual car either. Like, I can drive automatic car because I have a coordination issue. So it means that I can only drive automatic car, and I can't actually cycle without being in danger. So I'm happy to admit that, but I think there's a lot of people have said.
Now you've made me sound ableist as well. I thought you just didn't know how to. I'm sorry.
I have tried many times. I mean, if someone has if someone can sort out my issue, please do let me know.
There is also a thing with cycling that it's it can be fine in the summer or whatever. It's when it's on a wet Tuesday in February, it's not much fun. But there's also a practical thing. So I could easily cycle into town here. I very rarely do, because if I'm going in, I don't want to turn up for a meeting sweaty. That there is a practical thing there. I mean, on the thing is, on the war on motorists and all of this, there's a thing. This is a predominantly rural area. I think for a long time, most journeys by most people are going to be by private motor car. I think the question is, how do we give people options? Now, the options, partly because having those choices is nice in and of itself. It can also make things cheaper for residents. I mean, putting petrol in a car is expensive. Running a car is expensive.
It's more expensive than most people would admit as well. People don't do the proper calculations when you take account of the cost of buying a car, the mechanical stuff, getting serviced, MOT'd, fuel or electricity. If you were honest about the cost of driving a car, people complain about the cost of public transportation, but compared to the cost of running a car, it's really more expensive than most people would care to admit. Went through their bank statements.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an issue that the more you drive, the sort of cheaper it gets, because you're there's some fixed costs there. But I think it's like there's an environmental thing as well, that if people aren't using private cars, it is environmentally good. So there's option. There's a question from All the Lonely Gloves. Hello, Gloves. How do we go from discussing the case for prioritising public transport like forward-thinking countries have and weaning ourselves off cars. There seems to be a denial about the need to move away from cars in this country. So the thing is, this goes back, look, realistically, I think probably forever, a lot of, most journeys are like in part of the world like this, I'm going to be private car, because you're never going to have the density to make, bus, regular bus service, everywhere possible. I think it's about giving people options for more and more things. But it's, at least around here, I don't think it's necessarily the case. I mean, one of the other things with why people take cars, I mean, taking on board what you're saying, Stephen, is the cost of traveling by train can be really very high.
It is some of the most expensive routes in our region. I take Cambridge to London, for example. I think per mile, if you divide the cost, is one of the most expensive routes in the country, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's still true, but the most expensive train per mile in the world used to be the Heathrow Express.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, and I think from Huntingdon, I think it's nearly 60 quid now if you want a peak return with the tube from Huntingdon into London, which is very expensive. Feels very expensive. There's also so can I just go back to the sort of congestion thing and war on motorists? So I was looking this up. Do you know when a congestion charge was first proposed for Cambridge?
1993.
Nope. 1964. The Smead report.
I thought it was 93 because I saw one of the, I think, was it like a Liberal Democrat leaflet, like a historic one or something like that?
Don't trust Liberal Democrat leaflets. That's always a mistake.
It was a bar chart. No, it goes even further back. No, the thing is with Cambridge. Okay, so the SDZ panels hasn't gone through. That seems to be, that's gone. There is still a real problem that within the city of Cambridge, getting around in the city is really, really hard because there's an awful lot of people trying to drive through a small area. Particularly the centre of the city, but some of the big roads going in and out as well, simply cannot cope with the amount of traffic trying to go along them. One way or another, like for the economy of the region, that's going to need to be addressed. And that has knock-on effects. I mean, we went to Stagecoach the other week. The traffic in Cambridge has effects on buses in Huntingdon or buses in Waterbeach or wherever it happens to be. So there's if you're saying the war on motorists, even if it is just trying to get people to drive to the edge of Cambridge and then get the park and ride in, that becomes more attractive if there's less traffic. Because it's a sort of tragedy of the commons thing, where it's free, everybody uses it, and it ends up being worse, and it becomes a problem for the economy of the region generally. Sorry, I'll finish up. What I was saying is, like, in some way that and you've got to work out how to do it in the fairest way possible. But in some way that is impacting people, affecting people's choices. And affecting people's freedom to drive into the centre of Cambridge or whatever. But in the same way that you can't drive into the centre of Cambridge at 70 miles an hour because it doesn't work. And so at some point, there's going to have to be a serious conversation about, what do we do about public transport in Cambridgeshire? Someone on Facebook saying, what about more of the Ting bus? I really like Ting. I'm not sure about the sort of financing of it. I don't know if it would be easier if there was some sort of franchising or whatever, or enhanced partnership. I think the cost per user, I think, is relatively high.
It is. Yeah, I think it's one of the arguments against.
Yeah, I mean,
required. Yeah.
There's the thing that that is saving money elsewhere. We've had these discussions before, but we do have it is a real problem if you cannot, if every time you do something which will change the way people drive, it turns into, oh, this is a war on motorists. And you do get some people in the public just generally do that anyway, because people are used to driving, people don't like change and so on.
So in the west of the country, where David and I live, and where Alex might eventually live quite soon. So in terms of a war of motorists there, yeah, we've just spent £1.5 billion upgrading the A14. Yeah, we're going to start to spend another £1 billion upgrading the A428, A421, both of which are intended to make journey times into and around Cambridge much quicker. And those things are going to act like a funnel. So we're spending loads of public money, upgrading the road infrastructure, all of which will act to increase congestion. Now, I'm not saying that those projects shouldn't have gone ahead, but if you'd have taken half of that money and thrown it at subsidizing buses in rural locations, you could have made a real difference. And that's the problem, isn't it? Is there's no choice. If you need to work in Cambridge, or if you live in a rural village, you have to have a car, because without the bus services, no choice. And what we found out with the whole STZ congestion charging debacle is there's not much public will to subsidise buses, well, from drivers at least, but nobody really wants to pay for them, and that's the problem we can't solve. Or not just buses, but all public transport.
So as you mentioned, the GCP and the latest development, just for people watching, can any of you summarize what is the latest? I mean, since we last spoke, I think a couple of weeks ago, the GCP had the executive board meeting on the 28th of September, where the Making Connections paper was discussed. So what is your interpretation? Of course, the recommendation was, and the vote was, that the Making Connections, i.e. the bus improvements funded by congestion charge proposal, shouldn't go ahead. So what is your interpretation about what went wrong there, and what is next, I guess, if anything?
So it's completely dead now, isn't it? I think it's completely dead. We're back to square one. We haven't solved the two core problems, which is kind of bus connectivity and bus provision in the county, and congestion, which, as David said, contributes to the bus problems as well. And so there's been, lots of money's been spent, lots of debate has been had, and we haven't really moved it forward anymore, have we? So, I mean, I think there's still, where I live, so if you looked at the consultation results for my division, more people were in favour of congestion charging and better buses than were against it. So there is a will, certainly in this part of the county, for better buses, and I think it's critical.
But you're not part of the GCP area, and
no, but we're not. But it was going to involve us originally, and that was, so the original proposal was going to involve us. The cut down proposals probably wouldn't have involved us, so I wouldn't have supported those. But it's still the problem that if you live in Abbottsley, you get one bus a week, and and if you're a young person growing up in Abbottsley, there's not a war on motorists; it's a war on buses.
So I think this is an ex-parrot. It has ceased to, planting the fields and all that. So at some point, I think, well, hopefully there should be it would be good to get everyone to look at it as, from all parties and no parties, about how do you make big, difficult things happen in Cambridge. Now, this isn't a dig at any of the people. A lot of the structures are a hot mess, and because there are so many veto players, so there's so many things that could stop it happening. Or anything big in Cambridgeshire, that's a real problem. And it's so but also who is responsible for this? It was never entirely clear, because the GCP were proposing it, but it would have to be done by approved by the county council, Cambridgeshire County Council. The mayor of Cambridge and Peterborough is involved in some way.
He would have been providing the buses ultimately, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes back to the problems of local government. I think the comms on it were not great. Let's be honest. I think it's again, and it would be really good to have this discussion with people from, you know, other parties. Like, how do you do the communications around big, difficult things that are still worth doing, whether people agree with this particular one or not? Because I'm afraid I think this came to public light when somebody read the agenda pack for a GCP board meeting, which is that's not a particularly, and again, the people working in those structures are doing the best they can, but that's not a democratic way of doing it. But also, there was nobody really going out there and, like, in advance saying, look, what are the problems? How do we deal with these? You know, and that could be, you know, whatever, you know, big thing is next for Cambridge, for Cambridgeshire. You know, how do you do those things? And I'm, you know, they so just going back to the war on motorists thing. There will, and this isn't limited to, I'm not having because there were people in my own party, the Labour Party, who were guilty of this as well. It was controversial. People didn't like it, but the level of hostility that was directed at some councillors was outrageous. I mean, you can see, you know, why people don't want to go into politics, and the whole. This is one of my concerns about the whole war on motorist rhetoric. Is it's another it's another line that people can pick up, and it sort of makes people feel justified in their not their anger or their displeasure, but in the way, you know, in the sort of direct, personalized way they express their opposition. And like I said, I'm sure we're familiar with. Sorry, there's a comment there. Please provide details of said survey on buses, as the outcome sounds odd based on general feedback.
Oh.
Can I? Sorry, Stephen. I'll go. Sorry, I'll give you. Can I just? Sorry, I know it's early in the morning, and this is probably going to annoy people. People you have conversations with, or the general feedback, is a really, really unreliable guide to what most people think. I know we all do it. It shapes our opinions and so on. So if I sort of go and ask people about an issue, it's going to be the people I hang around with or the people I interact with who are, you know, going to be quite similar to me. I completely get where it comes from, but unless you've gone and done a sort of proper survey in some way, you actually had some methodology behind it, what people reckon you need to be really, really careful with. Sorry.
Can I just say, it was not a survey, it's the consultation, the formal consultation for the congestion charge proposals from GCP. Yeah, they're coded by political wards of divisions. And so I asked for the data for my division. Yeah, and it clearly shows that more people are in favour, were in favour of the SDZ than were against it, because my division has the worst bus provision in the whole county. So that's part of the problem as well. But actually, you know, that we talk about discussions. So I'm out every night talking to parish councils, talking to residents, yeah. And what I'd put loads of times on Twitter is my feelings in Huntingdonshire, where we're not directly affected by the congestion charge, and not some people drive in and will have to pay it, but most people don't. But we do suffer from bad buses. So my impression from talking to residents, you know, in and around here and talking on social media, is that in Huntingdonshire there was kind of mildly apathetic support. It wasn't a huge political issue, but most people would appreciate good buses and to be able to get into Cambridge for leisure purposes more than would be put off by it. And I realise that's very different from the Cambridge City view. But, you know, I'm elected to represent my residents, and if my residents say to me, we want this to happen, then I'll take the lead from my residents always, I think. Well, almost always.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to see the consultation results by division and compare, because of course in my division it was like probably opposite figures to Stephen's division, in the sense that it was like 60% were against and like 40% were, well, I guess reluctantly for. But then again, I have this criticism about, and I spoke about this before, about all local government consultations, because it's a self-selecting survey. And of course, you can do representative polling, and the GCP papers had a representative poll as well, which shows that actually it is a little bit different if you test it on a representative sample, in the sense the kind of against group is like less, less on the, I guess, like more, extreme against, and like kind of the opinions get more moderate in the representative poll. Like you have more people in the middle or people like unsure than in a self-selecting survey, which makes complete sense, because if you have a self-selecting consultation and you rely on people who want to respond, you'll either have the majority of people who you'll have people who are like either very against, they want to say, I don't want this proposal to ever happen, it will affect me directly, like I don't like this, please stop this now. Or people who will be on the other end saying like this is a great thing, like we should like fund the buses and we should have this proposal. What you get fewer of, not that you don't get any, but you get fewer of, are people in the middle who are like, I don't really care, or like it doesn't really affect me, or actually I can see the pros and cons for both, or actually I want something in the middle, which is neither what's proposed or what is the alternative for it. So you can't, basically you can't capture like the nuance in a self-selecting survey in the sense. I mean, of course you had like comments and so on, but I mean, I had to see or to read the full analysis of all the.
But if we're going to do consultations, we need to listen to the results of those consultations. Yeah. And it's beyond, you can't, across the whole county, more people are opposed to that, to the STZ than agree with it. But that's why I was against the referendum, because it's a simple yes and no question across everybody. But I need to speak up for my residents, and my residents have the worst bus provision in the whole county. And so there's lots of people who can speak up for Cambridge residents. Less people and fewer people can speak up for St Neots and the rural areas that I also represent. And so that's what I'm doing. What I was trying to do is listening to my residents, and I think that's the only way you can act in response to a formal consultation. And I think the county did listen to the results, and basically the political will evaporated, and we're not going to have an STZ. But like I said before, we're back to square one, but we're not back to square one, are we? Because this is still a massive political football. It's like dog with a bone. I'm looking at a motion from Fenland District Council, who agreed at their council meeting this week. They agreed a motion against the introduction of initiatives such as road charging, congestion charging, 20-minute cities, and traffic reduction measures in and around Fenland. And like, nobody's promoting a 20-minute city in Fenland. And even if they did, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And being opposed to traffic reduction seems really weird, because congestion is an issue in parts of St Neots, and I'm sure it's an issue in parts of Wisbech and March and places as well. And so you can't, being opposed to all of those things.
Well, traffic reduction is an interesting one. It includes, because traffic reduction measures, as like, as a phrase, can even mean like having some speed bumps or having other like kind of road furniture, or like kind
nobody wants to live on a rat run ever. And so that some of their residents won't like that if they find they can't, apply and speak out against cars driving down small rural streets. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I did see that, and it looked very party political, that thing.
I mean, like as most things are in politics.
But since Uxbridge by-election, since the failure of the congestion charge measure, it's a political football. And people, they won't let go of it. And so it's a massive issue. If we look at the next county council agenda, 5 motions, all on highways, some of them incredibly silly, some of them sensible. It's going to become, it's big. The opposition have latched onto this as a vote winner, perhaps correctly. And so we haven't gone back to square one. We've gone back to a situation where there's active hostility against buses and active travel, and it's a war on motorists, isn't it? And if it's a war on motorists, you're either for or against it. That's the way it's being posed, which is ridiculous.
I want to pick up on a comment here, because I think this from Dan, which is really relevant to this debate, saying there's an issue between national and local government. Local government is starved of resources, and national doesn't spend enough on public transport, which kind of then feeds into this kind of like who is to blame for what. And that's something I really picked up on the doorstep when speaking to people who recognize the issues. Okay, we need to do something about public transport. Of course, I would like to have better buses, but of course, I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to be penalized paying for it through this congestion charge, because I have to drive every day to work. I can't move my shifts around the peak or non-peak hours, which again was my criticism, because like if you do peak only hours, you kind of like people who actually can't move their work will be, will pay, and people who can start work at 11 a.m. wouldn't pay anymore for it. But anyway, so people were saying on the doorstep about, okay, how about, why can't we pay for this, from our council tax, or why can't the council pay for this, or why can't like other local taxes pay for this? And of course, like a fair question to ask, because there's this impression, and like, I had the same impression before seeing a council budget, right? So when I moved into Cambridge, and you pay like a higher like council tax than in some areas, and I get my council tax bill, and I have no idea like what it actually pays for, and I see the pothole in front of my house, and I get very annoyed, being like, what does my tax pay for? Like, this is not done yet, like you should pay for those potholes. But then of course I go into local politics, and I realize just how much all the local budgets have been cut, like under like the austerity, the managed decline austerity policies, and also how much of the local, so like i.e. the council tax, goes on things that I actually haven't appreciated before, just how much goes on, for example, the ever increasing need in adult social care, the home to school transport, like all those areas, for example, the county council overseas that Stephen can speak more about as well. Like, I haven't appreciated just the share in the budget of some of those things before. And of course, if you look at the reductions in spend and how local authorities are underfunded basically across the UK, and how many local authorities of all political colors, including Conservatives, are like near bankruptcy, like across the country now, it is actually a very scary thought. And like, it's very difficult to say like, yes, I want to put, because I would like to put more local money on buses, but first of all, it's not that easy. You can't just ring fence council tax to buses. But even if you could do it in a simple way, there's just not enough money for it.
And it's worth saying, until the 1980s, though, buses were run by councils. Yeah, and most of the buses that I used when we were kids were run by councils. And in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher decided to end that and commercialise bus provision. And and that's worked for a little while. But we get to the tail end of 2023, and we see everywhere that it's not particularly commercially viable. Post-COVID, it's not commercially viable, which is why we see every day, problems with Whippet buses, sometimes stagecoach buses getting cancelled, because it's not particularly profitable to run a bus routes, especially in rural areas.
Yeah. I mean, there is also, and it's horrible to say this, but you see it with the green bin charging, and you see it with the gully cleaning, and other things. We've had a series of things that have affected the economy really badly. So the current financial, situation, COVID, Brexit, Liz Truss, austerity. There's been, look, I don't want to go into the particular thing. The reality is, whatever you think of Brexit, so far the impact has meant we have got less money to spend. And the thing is, we are poorer as a country than we were. And one of the reasons we can't have nice things is there isn't as much money. I mean, there's also a distributional question about how we do tax and so on. But there's something I don't think anybody can promise sunlit uplands at the moment, because I think who just looking about the general election, whoever wins the next election, it's going to be a tough few years for a lot, for the country as a whole, and for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, and I think it's very difficult to be in, because as a politician of any, like at any level, like you want to say like, yes, of course, like you want to put on that leaflet like better buses, like I will fund bus in your area, but I think you got to be realistic to be like, okay, how much will this cost? Like the level of subsidy involved is huge to actually make rural transport work. Yeah. So I think you have to be realistic about this and realize, yes, something needs to pay for this, whether like what form of taxation, or whether we wait for national government to miraculously offer money to local authorities sufficiently to fund this. The reality is it is a huge cost. I don't think and like many people, I include myself in this, I didn't appreciate how much you have to subsidize rural routes for the buses to actually work and to be effective for people who need to go from the villages to the market towns, and also from villages to Cambridge for work, study, or whatever other purpose. It is a really challenging thing in an era of austerity, decreased local budgets. And I know and I understand how for a lot of people this doesn't seem fair, because at the same time you have like you have high taxes, like comparatively, like at the same time people are paying more, like in everything. You're paying more on like everything that you consume. You're paying high taxes, and then you think like, well, I'm getting very little from this. So it is really difficult.
That's really true.
From
Can I pick up on a comment there? Actually, I'm going to click on it because it'll make it appear.
Ooh.
If commercial bus routes are not profitable, then it's because there isn't a demand for these, i.e. cars are at preference, so apply car-friendly environments. That's what the public wants. I'm afraid I just think that's flat wrong. The issue is the demand may be there, but it can't be provided in a profitable way, but it may still be socially useful to provide. The other thing is, you say, okay, there's a demand for these. At the same time, we're spending quite a lot of money on taxis to take kids to school and so on. There's also the sort of cost implications of, for instance, you've got whoever it is living in the village who can't drive. If they're dependent on the one bus a week, they may not be able to move out of the village they live in, whatever it is, or may not want to. If there's the one bus a week, it severely limits their quality of life. The demand might be there for bus. There also has to be a certain amount of priming the pump to show that buses are a viable way of getting around places. I'm afraid, but also I'm like Eve. Sorry, that comment. That comment annoyed me a bit. I'm afraid I really strongly disagree.
But I think Ting has kind of proved, at the other end, that there is a demand for rural bus services.
But it needs to be subsidized.
Is it commercially viable? We don't know, because it needs to be scaled up. It requires lots of subsidy. But when you put something like the Ting in place, it's incredibly popular to the extent it's difficult to get a Ting. So I think it's not sensible to say there's no demand, because there's no provision either. And so once you put the provision in place, then the demand will increase. I think people get out of the habit of using buses as well quite often. And that's what we need to do. We need to get people back on the bus to make them more commercially viable. But like Darren from Stagecoach said, you're never going to make rural bus services completely self-funding, because there's just not enough people to do it.
Yeah, I think just to comment on that, I think it depends on the route, because I'll just give you one specific example. Like, let's say you live in Fulbourn village and you want to go to the East Cambridge, like Abbey side, you have to go via city centre. So you take the number 1 from Fulbourn, you go like via Drummer Street, like city centre in Cambridge, and you end up like, let's say, like near the stadium in Abbey. It takes you around like an hour. Like, if you're lucky, like, if there's like heavy traffic, if you go in rush hour around, like, sometimes I just get off the bus at one point and just walk because it's quicker. Like, I'll be honest. You could connect that route, like, from the outer ring of the city. So like you could connect the eastern part of the city from Fulbourn, but such route doesn't exist at the moment. I think that would be, or, connecting the east of the city to Addenbrooke's directly without going to the center. I think once you had the service in place, people would use that. That's what a lot of my residents say. However, of course, now if you're making the choice, do I go like an hour plus via the city center? Of course, if I had a car, and I'll be the first to admit it, I will drive the 8 minutes, because I don't have to go via the city center. I don't have a car, therefore I have to do all this like loop through the city center. So I think there's so many routes. It's just an example that I'm familiar with, but there's so many routes where currently, yes, it doesn't make sense. So it's very easy to say like, well, just make it better for cars. But if it was in place, I really think it would work. But I do agree with Stephen on the rural routes. It does need public taxpayer money subsidy, because otherwise it wouldn't work. But you have to subsidize those unprofitable routes from the profitable routes, because if you want to create more equality and like more equality of access to services, and like actually encourage prevention and actually encourage public health policies and other things, I think we can't just say like, well, we just do buses better for Cambridge and like leave all the villages out because we just need more taxpayer money for them. I think we need to think holistically, how can the city actually support routes in the rural villages outside the city as well. Do you want to pick up on any other comments, Stephen or David? There are quite a few that I see now.
I think one point to make is that this is quite complicated. I don't sound obvious. I mean, it's something that I think we sort of brought home, when we went and visited Stagecoach. things, buses in Huntingdon are affected by someone digging up the road in Cambridge. These are quite complicated issues, and there are trade-offs involved.
Well, some of the problems are caused by putting cyclist-friendly road infrastructure in place, restricting the road for buses and cars, and that's caused problems as well. So they are actual, definite trade-offs in, you can see almost real time. So that's definitely a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. Well, it's 8:30 actually now. I just realized what the time is, so I guess it's been.
Have you got a bus to catch?
No, not today, because I have to pack for Labour conference. I'm going on a bus with big suitcase with all the materials and stuff. So I'm carrying a big suitcase with the stuff that I need to do for events and so on the bus to Cambridge station tomorrow, and then I'm changing the train and then going to Liverpool. So tomorrow it'll be a fun day on public transport, but. Fortunately, today is one of the rare work from home days, so I don't have to be 6 hours on the bus. So, you got to appreciate the good times. Okay, so any final thoughts on what do you think we should look at next time in terms of topics? Do let us know in the comments as well. I think there's a lot to speak about those kind of policies. I would have liked to maybe touch more on the 20 mile an hour and the various areas that are funded in this round of 20 mile an hour areas from the county council. And there's a lot of other I guess policies that are debated currently, including the use of the bus lanes. I think that's quite an interesting one as well, as to what extent you should open up more of the bus lanes to cars and in what hours, or should you in the first place. I think that's one of the issues we have in Cambridge City, that actually very few of the roads you can have a separate bus lane. So actually the buses are stuck in the same traffic, whereas if you look at some many areas in London where you have the separate bus lane, it is definitely quicker to get by bus than by car on so many routes. So it's another interesting one as well. But yeah, I think I will end the discussion here. Do let us know in the comments if you have any other thoughts about either who to invite next time on, who would you like Stephen to debate with, because Stephen offered to debate any other person. My favorite thing is to moderate controversial discussions, so that could go very well. And also let us know I've
got something I want to debate with Stephen. Cats are better than dogs.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do it, because that's an easy win for me. So
you can have the train versus buses. I think there are a lot of interesting arguments and assumptions there as well.
Croydon versus St Neots as well. There's lots of mileage in those things.
Yes, which one is which is
Ives as well.
Yeah, which is the best market town? So that is a very controversial one. So yeah, let us know as well. All right, then I will end the live stream now. Have a good rest of the day. Hopefully you got to work on your commute. Hopefully the buses weren't too terrible this morning. Thank you both for joining, and see you next Friday at 7:30.
Okay. See you all. Take care.
Bye.